I think most people know and probably agree that the America is in a pretty hyper-partisan time at the moment. But there's one issue I have, and that is like specifically how that hyper-partisan environment is covered. And I think there's a really big issue that like discussion of it like inflates how extreme it can be. Now, of course, the politics themselves very, very divisive, and everyone would agree on that. But where I think there's an issue in coverage is specifically in geography. What I'm specifically talking about is like this norm in coverage of American politics that assumes that there are red states and blue states. And I don't think it's wrong to assume that there are definitely Democratic and definitely Republican states, but I think that application is a pretty dangerous one when looking at the American political divide. And I was thinking about this quite a bit yesterday, particularly when I was looking at like the swing states that currently exist. And I saw somebody covering, and I'm so sorry because like their name escapes me at the moment, but it was a few days ago talking about how when you talk in terms of red and blue, red versus blue, politics, not Halo, the issue is that when people separate themselves and like, oh, there are red states, blue states, clear dividing line, no middle ground, people tend to be more extreme in their politics because America is being presented to them not as one nation with two sides of politics. It's being presented to you as if there are two completely different Americas, which all states either fall into one column or the other. You're probably pretty familiar with this map here. This is the 2020 presidential election in which way the states went. And look, plenty of people have talked about how terrible this map is at presenting elections, so I won't go like entirely into that. But one problem I will hit on is the fact that it's just red and blue. This is like a problematic display because it shows like the country in like just two camps with no middle ground. This is a marginally better display because it shows you like with shading how extreme either state is either way. But I still think it like hits that like psychological like binary choice that we all have in our heads where it's like there are red states and there are blue states. Some are a little bit more one way or the other, but no matter which way it's presented here, a state is either blue or a state is red. So I wanted to take my own map and try and break that dichotomy that exists, and I'm not the first person to do this. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have done this before, but what I wanted to look at was those 1 in 10 states, like those states where if 1 in 10 voters change their mind, the result can be completely inverted. Just imagine a group of 10 people. Imagine one person there changing their mind. That is how narrow these states actually are. Now, you don't hear about purple states nearly as much as you used to, as states seem to become increasingly more like in their corners, as it were, and less likely to flip. And look, this is only looking at American presidential elections, not House or Senate or gubernatorial, which are totally their own thing. But I figure just looking at it from the presidential angle is pretty fair because those are like the highest engagement forms of politics. So what do these states look like? Like if you take that map and you make states purple, states where if one person in 10 changes their mind, the whole thing is flipped. Well, America looks like this, which is quite a bit different to the map you're probably used to seeing. Now, you might think of Texas and Florida as Republican strongholds because in a presidential sense, they are, and most other senses. But you also need to remember how many Democrats actually live there. Now, everyone knows the state where Democrats get the most votes, California. Where they get the second and third most votes out of any state, Florida and Texas. Florida and Texas both have more than 5 million Democratic voters. And look, these states aren't being lost by the Democrats by landslide margins, as you might imagine. Texas is decided by 5 percentage points. 5 percentage points. It's not just like 1 in 10, it's 1 in 20. If 1 in 20 voters in Texas change their minds, the state would flip blue. For Florida, it's only a 3% margin to the Republicans as of the last election. That is not an insurmountable thing to overcome. And look, I'm not saying that those states are going to flip the other way, but it's wrong to view them as red states as if there is no like existence there of opposition to the dominant political party. And that truth swings both ways. Do you know which state has the most registered Republicans and the most Republican voters? It's California. There are 6 million Republicans in California that go out and vote. That is a roughly Missouri worth of just Republicans in California. But no one would ever think of California as being a state that has Republicans because of this false notion of it's blue through and through. Now, look, the Electoral College is a winner-take-all system. So people think of it in terms of the side that wins the whole thing. But that really paints this like false idea that Americans in certain parts of the country only think one way, which they do not. There are more Democrats in North Carolina than there are Republicans in Tennessee. So you can't view this nation as just like breaking from like one camp to the other, when really it's a very unstructured, mangled mess of how people think. So short, meaningless rant over, but to conclude, if somebody is showing you a blue and a red map, while it might not be malicious, they are certainly deciding to show you a map that makes you think of America as two warring sides with clearly divided like battle lines, and that behind the red and behind the blue, there's just like this uniformity. That does not exist, and that is not real. What people really need to take away from this is that the country actually looks like this, and the idea of dividing it into just two separate camps will never work, because that's not how the American people work.